Fierce.
Destroyers are the greyhounds of the sea.
Strong.
The 510 feet of fighting steel here is just absolutely amazing.
Reliable.
We are ready at any time to respond to the nation's calling.
Awe-inspiring.
The destroyer is capable of defending areas against ballistic missile attacks.
Batteries released on every target you got now!
The U.S. naval destroyers are among the fastest and most heavily armed ships in the world. Considered the tip of the spear in any fight, its presence is critical to any engagement with the enemy the Navy has to face.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations.
Its guns can identify and attack a threatening ship, or locate and neutralize a land threat.
Target acquired.
Fire!
Its sailors can provide humanitarian relief, use its torpedoes to defend against a submarine, destroy enemy aircraft, and engage in ballistic missile defenses.
TAO, ballistic missile fire! Fire!
All of those high-energy action sequences were created with Hollywood magic, but filmed on an actual naval destroyer. The results of a unique partnership between the U.S. Navy and TNT to grant you real access into the Navy's world and this amazing fighting ship through TNT's summer hit, The Last Ship. From Hollywood blockbuster action director and executive producer Michael Bay, and starring Eric Dane as Captain Chandler, this successful post-apocalyptic show utilizes an active U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer to create a $1.8 billion set piece, the USS Nathan James. In this special, we will not only talk to the creators and actors of The Last Ship, but also actual naval officers and commanders to find out more about the history of the destroyer, its capabilities, and how it became America's first fighting ship. The U.S. naval destroyer, often called the Greyhound of the Sea, had humble beginnings. In 1866, after the invention of explosive self-propelled mines that move through the water, called fish torpedoes, small torpedo boats became a major threat to large battleships on the high seas. By the 1880s, it became necessary for the United States to build a smaller, faster ship called a torpedo boat destroyer to not only defend their battleships from these threats, but also to launch their own torpedoes. The first torpedo boat destroyer built and commissioned by the U.S. Navy was the USS Bainbridge on February 12, 1903. And by the end of World War I, the torpedo boat destroyer had evolved as an all-around naval destroyer, adding anti-submarine capabilities, anti-aircraft guns, depth charges, and even larger torpedo tubes. By World War II, the naval destroyer received a radical new design, getting even bigger, faster, and more efficient with the Fletcher class. These destroyers became the most successful fighting machines in the Pacific Theater of Operations. Now, flash forward 70 years later to today's modern class of destroyers. Multi-mission guided missile destroyers with incredible improvements in radar and sonar, upgraded weapons, a helo bay, and many other cutting-edge features.
The destroyers that we have today are far more advanced, far more capable than even the battleships and heavy cruisers of the past.
The Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. Named after Admiral Arleigh Burke, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are the most capable surface warship ever built.
I don't think there's a single sailor that doesn't know the name Arleigh Burke, not just because of the ship, but because of the contributions that he made to the Navy. His legacy is one of those things that we as destroyermen hold near and dear to our hearts. The fact that the ship class bears his name is very important. The Arleigh Burke as a hull, as a ship, is an absolute phenomenal design.
This is an Arleigh Burke destroyer. It was built to fight, you better know how.
The missions, the capabilities, the systems that we have squeezed into 510 feet of fighting steel here is just absolutely amazing.
Go to the 5-inch.
The Arleigh Burkes are the first class of destroyers built around the Aegis combat system, which uses computer and radar to seek out, track, and destroy enemy targets.
The Aegis combat system is at the heart of not only the Arleigh Burke class, but also the cruisers that we have in service.
The Aegis radar allows the destroyer to centralize the use of its combat resources, such as its missiles, its massive 5-inch gun, and its torpedo arsenal.
Rather than have a gun that's autonomous from the radar, that's autonomous from the missile systems, that's autonomous from the torpedoes, you've incorporated all these to work together so that all the information that you can gather, all the information that you have at your disposal is now making your effectiveness better. If you can make a decision in a shorter amount of time, then you have more battle space to deal with. And the Aegis combat system really enables us to make good, sound decisions.
Target acquired.
When the combat starts and when the fog of war starts to roll in.
One critically important aspect of the Aegis combat system is its anti-ballistic missile defense system.
TAO ballistic missile fire detected.
Fire! Fire!
Ballistic missile defense is a really fascinating part of what we do. And probably the most fascinating part for me is the Aegis weapon system. It was never even conceived that it would do that. The system has evolved as this evolving ballistic missile threat has evolved.
Ballistic missiles are one of the most daunting, medium and long-range threats to the security of the United States and its allies around the world. These missiles are meant to carry warheads, possibly nuclear, to a predetermined target. Rocket-propelled at launch, its trajectory is eventually unpowered, similar to a cannonball, relying on gravity and air resistance to reach its target. One ballistic missile can contain multiple warheads, each capable of striking a different target.
Those are very, very difficult weapons to hit out of the sky. To give you an idea of how difficult the intercept of a ballistic missile is, and the way I would characterize it is we're really hitting a bullet with a bullet when we execute ballistic missile defense.
All head full.
Aye, all head full.
The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is indeed fast, incredibly fast.
Destroyers are the Greyhounds of the sea, powered by 4 gas turbine LM2500 engines. They provide about 120,000 shaft horsepower. At the end of those shafts are about 17.5-foot diameter propellers. They will take her from 32 knots to all stop in about 2 ship lengths, which is about 1,000 feet. So when you're talking nearly 10,000 tons going through the water at 40 miles an hour, going all stop.
All engines back full!
0 miles an hour in 1,000 feet. That's fairly impressive.
There are currently 62 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers either in port or deployed throughout the world, making the training and prepping of these ships and her crews critical to keeping them active and ready to fight.
It takes a long time to get a destroyer ready for deployment, and it's not just about the hull and the ship, it's about the crew. The crew size is about 328 right now. That will be supplemented by the air department. So when the helicopters are embarked, they bring the maintenance crew and the pilots. Typically, it's about 28 extra sailors on board. Preparation starts years in advance. You're gonna have a pretty large crew turnover prior to the next deployment. Sailors rotate duty stations all the time, and you're gonna get new sailors that have not been on deployment, and you have to train them.
From deployment to deployment, we're on a 36-month cycle. A bunch of that time is in a standby status. There's about a 6-month period of time that we spend maintaining the ship, and then about a 9-month cycle where we take it through various phases of training up through certification by the fleet commander in order to be able to deploy.
Our ability to stay at sea is measured in months rather than days, which separates us and separates our capabilities from the rest of the world. The fact that we can stay at sea for months at a time makes us premier force. That's what we are designed to do. We are a Navy. We need to be at sea. Ships don't belong pierside, they belong at sea. That is fundamental to our mission set as a Navy. We are ready to fight on a moment's notice, and that's our job. So being forward deployed is our mission.
After a destroyer's deployment ends, the ship must once again be maintained, and the process of training and preparing for the next deployment begins.
Being at sea for 7, 8, 9 months wears hard on a ship, wears hard on a crew, and there's a lot of maintenance that needs to go into getting her back ready into a fighting shape. So that maintenance phase can be anywhere from 6 months to sometimes a year, just depending on your life cycle of the ship. While you're in that maintenance phase, you're training the crew how to maintain the gear that you're given, operate the equipment. It's kind of a crawl, walk, run mentality. Then you start your basic training phase. And that's where you start blocking and tackling, building blocks of getting ready to fight, to support your primary mission areas of air, surface, and undersea warfare. Once you have the basics down, can you operate the ship? Can you navigate the ship? Can you control your engineering plant? Can you control casualties that may occur?
Man fire stations.
It's fire or flooding. Can you land a helicopter on your deck? And that's when you start to tie things together. Can you accomplish surface and air warfare at the same time? And then it's kind of putting all those pieces together so that when you are ready for deployment, it's all culminated into one operating and fighting ship.
Once at sea, a destroyer and her crew are ready to be called upon on a moment's notice.
We are designed to handle every mission across the board, from humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to air warfare, strike warfare, ballistic missile defense. So everything from the bottom of the ocean to the very tops of the skies. The most recent significant humanitarian assistance relief was Operation Tomodachi in Japan. We had an earthquake that generated a tsunami that then precipitated into a nuclear disaster. You can't foresee those types of events cascading like that. The response that the U.S. Navy brought really impacted the way that we were able to conduct and the way that we were able to help, not just in our standard warfare set of destroying things, it's now we're creating, now we're making water, we're making supplies, we're sending sailors to the beach to help in any way we can.
One of the most spectacular capabilities of the Arleigh Burke destroyer in The Last Ship is the Nathan James's use of the helo bay, a feature that is also revered on actual naval destroyers.
The helicopter plays a significant role in many mission areas, not just warfare in terms of surface warfare or air warfare, but also in search and rescue. If we have a man overboard, that's a situation that is absolutely terrifying. The fact that you could lose a sailor overboard and not realize it for several hours means that you've got to cover a lot of water space in a short amount of time to ensure survivability. So the helicopter can cover a lot more ground than we can in terms of searching and being able to recover a man. And then we can bring our capability to bear in a rapid fashion rather than having to go through the search pattern and find them ourselves.
With so many deployment schedules, mission objectives, ship maintenance requirements, and crew cycles to manage across the destroyer fleet, it begs the question, why would the U.S. Navy offer an active Arleigh Burke-class destroyer to TNT as a production set to shoot The Last Ship?
I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the American public to see what we do on a daily routine basis, not only with our traditions and our history and our heritage, but also on the mundane, minutia of what we do. The average age is 21, 22, and what these sailors do on a daily basis is truly amazing. So the show is a fantastic opportunity to shed light on that and hopefully inspire kids, hopefully inspire young adults to want to serve. It's a very good tribute to the Navy. It's a very good tribute to this country.
Take two, sounds fit. Hey, Mark.
And action!
Having Hollywood powerhouse action director Michael Bay produce the series can't hurt either.
Michael obviously brings all this experience working with the Navy, the military, the Pentagon, and that opened so many doors for us when it came time to shooting the pilot. Just having his name on the show brings an audience and has an expectation for scope and action and dynamic, visually compelling material. And, that set a standard for us from the beginning that we continue to try to aspire to. And I think we've been successful with that.
You're here.
You're here.
Look at the ship. There's not a lot of things more spectacular and impressive than a Navy destroyer. And so we figured we'd check that block off right away. That partnership, what we bring, and then also with the ideas of TNT, they put into their scripts and the quality of those things, we feel it really portrays who our people are and what the Navy's all about today.
I swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America.
In order to achieve that authenticity, the Navy works very closely with the production team of The Last Ship.
Tension on deck!
For this show to resonate with people, it's got to be rooted in some sort of reality. And the Navy's there to make sure that what we're doing while we're representing them is depicted as accurately as possible. Everybody in this cast takes it very seriously. I know the writers do. We're also here to emulate men and women in the United States Navy. The best way to do that would be to get it right. I'm Commander Tom Chandler, United States Navy.
Some of the things that I might assist with would be just
maintaining the realism of some of the scenarios. Having been a destroyer and a cruiser captain, helping with how the captain communicates with the crew.
We wait until we see their blast. Is that clear?
Aye, sir.
How decisions are made, those type of things. And I would tell you that those are scenarios that we can incorporate ourselves into just through our experience.
Our Navy advisors come up with incredible ideas on nearly every episode. It could be the big idea of the show. It could be the small piece of tactical advice that kind of unlocks a key scene for us. It's a wide range, but oftentimes we are working with them from the ground up to build the episode and to make sure it's all credible, but they're incredible creative partners.
That partnership and collaboration starts in the writer's room.
One of the things that I thought was really great is the writers, and the creative team bringing me in and just making me feel at home and asking me, hey, what do you think about this? And me being able just to provide my opinion based on my experience being a captain of other ships. If we can help develop that script and make it more real, the earlier that we're involved, the better it is for the quality of it, I believe.
And salute!
Anywhere from Captain Chandler, maybe making sure he's saluting when he should, to the dialogue when they're in the Combat Information Center, when the ship is engaging. All that has been very accurate. And that's why I think the show is so popular with people within the Navy.
We find inspiration every single day we're around these men and women of the U.S. Navy. Whether it's the way they speak, the way they talk to each other, the stories they tell us, or just their rituals. I find myself watching them interact, and I'll find stories just in little things that they take for granted. Season 2, I read a story about the background of 8 bells at noon and how the ship's captain has to give permission for them to strike the bells to say it's 12 o'clock noon.
Request permission to strike 8 bells on time.
Permission granted.
These days with cell phones and watches on your wrists, you would think you don't need permission to say what noon is. So I did some digging and I learned that there was once a mutiny being planned. And the mutineers said, when they strike 8 bells, that's when we'll make our move. The captain found out about it, refused to let them call 8 bells. He foiled the mutiny, and ever since then, the policy is the captain says when it's noon. They still do it to this day. Why do they do it? Because it's part of their culture. It's part of the leadership of the commander of the ship. It sends a message that things get done a certain way, and it keeps people all focused on the mission, and it keeps good order and discipline, and it keeps them alive, ultimately. I find those things fascinating.
Of course, in a dramatic television summer hit, there are times when reality takes a back seat to action.
We still can't get around the one where Captain Chandler always leaves the ship and leads these crazy missions, these near-death experiences that he has.
And I've met Eric Dane and talked to him about this, but Captain Chandler gets involved with a lot of stuff that captains, don't always necessarily get involved with.
In Star Trek, Captain Kirk always went off the ship. Nobody ever said anything. We were aware that when we were conceiving the show that Navy captains tend to not leave their ship, that there are younger, trained guys who are either SEALs or VBSS teams that typically go off ship. We were able to actually turn that into an advantage for us. It's a whole different world. It's the apocalypse. And Chandler, being a former SEAL himself, being someone who's trained to go out into the field, they don't have the usual support they have. As the episodes go on, more and more of the guys are wounded or killed in battle, and there's just not enough bodies.
So for today, I'm just a body with a gun.
We also realized we've got Eric Dane. If he's just sitting in that captain's chair all the time, ordering people into danger, it may not be the most heroic depiction of our captain.
They always chuckle when I say, yeah, I'm going off the ship again to lead a mission into a pirate haven in Shanzai where everybody's armed to the teeth. And they laugh because the captain would never leave the ship. But I always do, and I always make it back.
Captain on the bridge.
Welcome back, sir.
Once filming starts, the real challenge of bringing a film crew on board an active naval destroyer begins.
Everyone gets such a kick out of going to San Diego twice a year for a few days each trip and actually shooting on the real ship. And that's always such an incredible dynamic experience for the cast, for the crew. Really never know what's going to go on there because it's an active military base.
Bringing any amount of people on board the ship is always a challenge. We've got 509 feet to work with, and it's a very confined space. When you bring a 150-person production team on board, it is truly invasive. We have a mission to achieve on a daily basis.
We have access to both officers and enlisted sailors who, once they get over the shock of our invading their space, they get as much enthusiasm about watching us work as we do about watching them perform their tasks. So what happens is there's always an interchange or an exchange of ideas, and sometimes we can incorporate them right into the story.
One time where the ship that was docked on the next pier was doing some kind of electromagnetic testing, and it kept shutting down our cameras because our cameras are sensitive to that, and it literally kept shutting down the cameras in the middle of the scene. We were just all scrambling for something to do, and eventually our camera department and the grips were able to come up with some kind of casing to protect the camera, and from that point on, it became impervious to shutting down. But for like 3 hours, we didn't know how we were gonna be able to finish the work. At the same time, it was cool because it was like, this is so real that we're sitting here on a ship and they're doing this incredibly sophisticated weaponry that can shut down our cameras.
Schedules of the destroyer fleet are constantly evolving based on mission priorities. So The Last Ship films on many different Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to bring a full season of The Last Ship to life.
3 Navy destroyers in the first season and another 3 ships for season 2. And it has escalated to the point now where people vie to have the portrayal of their ship brought into it so that they can showcase their integrity, they can showcase the pride of their ship in the fleet, and give them a very accurate, a very realistic picture of our conduct, our ethics, our standards.
Spending so much time with the real men and women of the U.S. Navy has had a lasting emotional impact on the cast and crew.
We were on the ship in San Diego a few months ago shooting some episodes. We watched as a ceremony was taking place, and I was chatting with the captain of the ship, the real captain. We were chatting about all kinds of things, and he said, "Excuse me, I have to go over here for a second and do something." I said, "No problem, of course, do your job." So we're all working, the crew's working, and he goes to the quarterdeck of the ship where there's a plank that leads to the pier. And suddenly he and the other officers are lined up facing each other, maybe 10 on each side, at attention. And then out of the dark tunnel, a young lieutenant comes out, a young woman. She comes out and she's saluting. And everyone stands at attention, and she salutes all the way down the line, and then she stops, and she, I don't know, it always gets to me. She stops and she faces the captain and she says,
"Permission to go ashore for the last time." Permission granted.
And she turns and she walks off the plank, off the brow. And normally they stop and they turn and they face the stern of the ship and they salute the flag. As she's walking, the captain says, "Hip, hip." And everyone says, "Hooray."
Hip, hip! Hooray! Hip, hip!
And as she reaches the middle of the ship, where she's supposed to stop and turn, he says,
"Don't look back!"
And she just keeps going. She doesn't look back. And I'm watching this, and my writers are with me, and there's crew members around us, and we're all in tears. We don't understand why. There's something very moving about it. And I asked the captain, I said, what the hell is that? And he said, "It's just something we do in the Navy. It's a tradition. It's been around for hundreds of years. And it's our way of respecting each other and saying, you know, you'll always be part of us, but you also have to move forward." And so I thought, that's the end of the season right there. And so we're left to wonder, where is Chandler off to? Where's he gonna go next? How are we gonna get him back on the ship? What's gonna happen next season?
It's that kind of reverence for the Navy's traditions that has deeply earned the respect of the enlisted sailors.
The most memorable instance that happened for me, Adam Baldwin, who plays the executive officer aboard, and Charles Parnell, who plays the command master chief, were doing a scene that was in between takes, and Charles, just goofingly around, ends up saluting the executive officer because of the enlisted officer relationship. And without missing a beat, Adam looks to me and says, "We're indoors. You don't salute uncovered indoors."
Hold on, sorry, do that again.
It was funny because they had caught themselves without having to police, without having to adjust them, even in a joking manner, that they had adjusted and adapted to our culture so much, taken it on board, and were living it every single day, whether they were in front of the camera when it was rolling or not. And that was touching.
Permission to salute the captain.
Permission granted.
I admire very much the diligence with which the Navy does their job. they put us to shame. It's humbling to see young men and women in their early 20s running these warships, these complex military weapons systems. And my goal is to try to recreate that as authentically as I can. So for us to have a naval advisor with us every step of the way is invaluable.
Bravo Zulu to each and every one of you. Enjoy your success, because we're going home.
When we have sailors go to boot camp, one of the first things we teach them are the Navy's core values of honor, courage, and commitment. And I think when you look at, Eric Dane and Adam Baldwin and the whole crew and what they portray, I think they reflect our core values.
We care a lot about honor, courage, and commitment as an ethos to serve and defend our country. That is the foundation of what the Navy is. The production has taken to incorporating these as the foundation, not just for how they portray the characters, but as an ethos for the production company as well, so that our culture has, in essence, become theirs. And it's easy for that just to translate right onto the screen and have those portrayals shown in an identical light to what the U.S. Navy does today.
As a result, on June 7th, 2016, the cast and crew of The Last Ship received the Navy's highest civilian honor, the Distinguished Public Service Award, presented by Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus.
My father was in the Naval Air Corps coming out of World War II. I didn't have the chance to serve. My life sort of took a different path, so I get to play one on television. So from a humble CO aboard the Nathan James,
Captain's on the bridge.
I send out my sincerest gratitude to those who are the real deal. Couldn't do it without you.
My father was in the Navy and he fought in the Vietnam War. And I don't really have much to remember him by. I lost him when I was 7 years old. And Ray Mabus, the Secretary of the Navy, brought me into a room and he said, I want to present you with something. And he gave me every single one of my father's service records. He had a shadow box made with all of his medals. They'll never know how much it means to me. It's something the Navy provided for me that nobody else on this planet could.
We have the best sailors in the world. Talent that our country produces, and those young men and women that come into our United States Navy, the show has the opportunity to show that dedication and the authenticity associated with that. I mean, I got the fact that, it's fiction and it's entertainment. But I think the show does a great job of trying to bring that through and work those two together.
The Navy knows we're not here to make a commercial for the U.S. Navy, but they also know that if we do our job right, it'll be the best commercial for the Navy they can have, because we're showing our heroes adhering to really wonderful core values. And I think that cast and crew alike would attest that when we spend time with these men and women, we just get more and more respect for them.
See more of this special partnership with the U.S. Navy by catching up on past episodes of The Last Ship anytime on demand. Also, look for new episodes next summer on TNT.